I had just lived through my own worst nightmare. The HOA president's golden child decided to tamper with my Harley right as 4 police drones circled above my house. His excuse? He claimed the neighborhood rules gave him the right to take a test ride. But the only thing that spun out of control that day was his mother's reputation. Let me take you back to where it all began. The first sound I heard wasn't a siren. It was a sharp, whining buzz, like a swarm of angry insects swarming toward my garage. I was sitting in my home office, phone pressed to my ear, locked in a conversation that could change not just my life, but the fate of our entire neighborhood. On the other end of the line was Arthur Davies, a senior investigator from the state attorney's office. Calmly, step by step, I was walking him through years of fraud, phony invoices, doctored accounts, and crooked deals. All of it masterminded by our so-called HOA president, the queen of control herself, Karen Lance. My voice was steady. I had spreadsheets, bank records, undeniable proof. I was inches away from the win that would finally topple her throne. That's when the buzzing grew louder. Irritated, I glanced out the window. Probably just some kid's toy, I thought. "Hold on, Mr. Davies," I muttered. Something strange is going on outside. My wife, Heather, had stepped onto the back porch, shielding her eyes against the sun. Her curious expression shifted to one of real concern. And then I saw them. 4 sleek black drones, each marked with a tiny blue emblem and the word police, dropped into a flawless diamond formation around my house. A single red eye blinked from the front of each one. My heartbeat spiked. This wasn't a toy. This was official. This was law enforcement. Before I could make sense of it, one drone darted low, hovering directly over my driveway. Its camera lens pointed straight at my prized possession, my Harley-Davidson Fat Boy. Chrome, gleaming, every detail polished with care, that bike wasn't just a machine. It was freedom. It was weekends on the open road. And now, somehow, it was the target of a police probe. Heather rushed back inside, her face pale. "What's happening?" she whispered. I had no answer. Moments later, sirens wailed closer, red and blue lights flaring through the blinds. A searchlight cut across my chest, and a nervous young officer's voice boomed through a bullhorn. "Hands where we can see them, sir!" Neighbors peeked from doorways, curiosity etched on their faces. My phone buzzed, a text from my uncle, our neighborhood's unofficial gossip. It read only 3 words. "What did you do?" along with a link to Facebook. I opened it and froze. It was a live stream from none other than Karen Lance herself. The footage was coming straight from the drone hovering over my Harley. Her caption was dripping with self-righteousness. "Pray for my son Trevor, victim of emotional abuse by a cruel neighbor who refuses the HOA's Youthful Desires provision." Youthful Desires provision? I'd never heard of such nonsense. And then the camera zoomed in. There was Trevor, 15 years old, lying dramatically on my front lawn, clutching an energy drink like a wounded actor in a school play. But next, to him, gleaming in the sun, was a bent butter knife. And scratched across the ignition of my Harley, fresh, jagged damage. I watched in disbelief as the video replayed Trevor trying to jam the knife into my bike, panic flashing across his face, when the alarm screamed and chrome screeched, a $1,200 scar carved into my pride and joy. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a mistake. Karen had staged the entire scene. She'd sent her son to vandalize my property, called the police, and turned the cameras on. Me, all while I was on the phone with a state investigator exposing her fraud. For a moment, fury burned hotter than fear. But then clarity hit me. She thought she'd trapped me. In reality, she'd just handed me everything I needed. "Mr. Davies," I said, my voice firm now, "are you still listening? And more importantly, are you watching this?" There was silence, then a low, deliberate breath. "Oh, I'm watching," Davies replied, "and I'm recording. Tell me, does your security system cover the driveway?" A slow smile spread across my face. Karen had no idea the storm she'd just unleashed. She thought she was cornering me, but in truth, she'd just lit the fuse on her own downfall. Because in our neighborhood, Eagle's Landing appearances might promise peace and freedom. But under Karen's rule, it was anything but. And now, she had just made the one mistake you never make. She underestimated me. Even though I kept a spotless mat beneath my bike, the citations kept coming. Each one more absurd than the last. Karen wasn't just enforcing rules. She was waging a war of attrition. And for a long time, she was winning. Heather begged me to just move the Harley into the garage and pay the birdhouse fine. "It's not worth it," she'd plead, her voice torn between wanting peace and standing with me. But for me, it wasn't about a motorcycle or a birdhouse anymore. It was about principle, about a bully who used community rules as a weapon to squeeze money from her neighbors. And I knew I wasn't the only one. I'd heard whispers, stories of liens slapped on homes over petty violations, of families paying thousands for things they hadn't even done. Everyone was too afraid to resist. They saw what she was doing to me and wanted no part of it. That's when my profession became my secret weapon. I'm a forensic accountant. My work is about spotting patterns, finding the needle in the haystack of numbers. And I could smell fraud long before most people even knew it was there. So I started digging. I formally requested 3 years of HOA financial records, something I had every legal right to do. Karen stalled, delayed, tried every trick she could think of. But eventually she had to hand them over, and what I uncovered was worse than I imagined. It wasn't just petty fines. It was a full-scale scheme. Kickbacks from landscaping companies, contracts funneled to a consulting firm under her brother-in-law's name, and a secret slush fund of fines that never appeared in the official books. Karen wasn't just a tyrant. She was stealing outright from the people she claimed to serve. Tens of thousands of dollars. Gone. That's when I knew this was bigger than me. I had to go to the state attorney. For a month, I worked nonstop. Cross-referencing. Numbers, building airtight spreadsheets, compiling receipts. When I was done, I had a case no one could ignore. And with a folder full of evidence, I scheduled a call with Arthur Davies, a senior investigator. What I didn't know was that at the same time, Karen, furious over a motorcycle she couldn't control, was setting the stage for her own downfall. She thought she was striking first. She didn't realize she was about to light her own fuse. The spark came quietly, in my own driveway. A few days before my scheduled call, I was in the garage polishing the Harley. It was my meditation, the rhythm of the cloth, the shine of chrome, the smell of polish. Heather appeared with 2 glasses of iced tea, her way of making peace. "It looks beautiful," she said softly, but her eyes carried worry. "Are you sure you want to keep pushing this? Isn't it dangerous to keep poking the bear?" I sighed, wiping my hands on a rag. "Heather, the bear's been poking us for 2 years. It's time someone poked back. She's not just a bully. She's a thief." I hadn't told her everything yet. No need to weigh her down with the details. But she knew enough. That's when I noticed him. Trevor, Karen's son. 15, full of his mother's arrogance, strolling casually down the sidewalk, across the street. He tried to look disinterested, but his eyes were locked on my bike. He bent to tie his shoe, but I could see it. His gaze fixed on the ignition like a thief sizing up a prize, a fox staring at a hen house. I slipped an arm around Heather. "Let's go inside." The boy glanced up, caught my stare, and quickly walked away. But the look was burned into my mind. That night, I installed a new security camera. This wasn't paranoia. This was experience. My new system had crystal-clear video, sharp audio, and backed everything up to the cloud. The camera was discreet, tucked under the eaves of the garage, pointed straight at the Harley. If Trevor or anyone else tried something, I'd know. The very next morning, I made it official. I sent a certified letter requesting the HOA financials, under state law. That was my opening move. Karen's counterattack came quickly. Another violation notice. This time, for unauthorized exterior modification. Translation, my camera. Fine, $200. It was so predictable it almost made me laugh. That's when my Uncle Jimmy stepped in. Retired plumber, sharp as a tack, and with a lifelong hatred of bullies. He phoned me up, voice booming. A fine for a security camera? That woman's got more nerve than common sense, don't you see? She's fishing, trying to see your hand. Don't blink, I wasn't going to. I wrote a polite formal response, certified mail again, explained the camera was for security, a homeowner's right, and refused to pay the fine. And I reminded them that if they failed to provide the records in the legal time frame, the state would hear about it. Checkmate. For the next 2 weeks, the neighborhood buzzed with tension. People gave me nervous looks at the mailbox, whispers carried on the wind. Karen's allies on the board began to sweat. Their queen's little empire was cracking, and then the envelope came, thick, stuffed with papers. She'd tried to drown me in hundreds of pages of budgets, reports, and invoices. A classic document dump, designed to overwhelm me. But this was my arena. I tore through them like a surgeon. Within a week, I had it all. Ghost employees, checks written to P.O. boxes tied to her relatives, unexplained cash transfers. Line by line, I mapped her corruption and condensed it into a clean, devastating 10-page report. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was proof. The inciting incident wasn't one explosion. It was a series of quiet moves. The stare from her son, the installation of a camera, the request for records, the unraveling of her lies. Piece by piece, I had built the case. Finally, I picked up the phone and called the state attorney's office. Davies answered. Calm, professional, but cautious. So you're alleging that Ms. Lance authorized over $30,000 in payments to a landscaping company that doesn't even exist at the listed address? He asked, papers shuffling on his end. Not alleging, I corrected, steady as steel. Stating it as fact. I have the transfers, the invoices, and I had the photos, too. The so-called business address for the landscaping company was nothing more than a vacant lot overrun by Canadian geese. It was undeniable proof. I was in my element, laying out the logic step by step. Numbers, patterns, fraud. It was my battlefield. Heather tiptoed into my office and set down a steaming cup of coffee beside me. Her eyes asked the question she didn't voice. How's it going? I gave her a small, confident nod. She squeezed my shoulder gently, a quiet show of loyalty, and slipped out of the room. That simple gesture steadied me. I wasn't just doing this for me. I was doing it for her, for us, for the home Karen had poisoned. I pressed on, moving to the consulting contract funneled to Karen's brother-in-law. The scope of work was laughably vague. The payments all made as cash withdrawals from HOA funds. It's a textbook kickback scheme, I explained. She's treating the HOA like her personal ATM. Davies gave a low hum of interest. The distance in his tone was fading. He was leaning in now, piecing together the puzzle. That's when the whining started. At first faint, like a mosquito outside the glass, then louder, closer, until it was impossible to ignore. Hold on a second, Mr. Davies, I muttered, muting the call and walking to the window. What I saw froze me in place. 4 drones, sleek, official, marked with police emblems. They descended in tight formation, circling my home like predators. My pulse spiked. This was so far beyond anything I expected. Had Karen somehow found out? Did she have someone inside the department? Was this her version of intimidation? Then came the sirens. Distant at first, then screaming down the street. My perfect presentation, my careful case, all of it felt like it was about to be swallowed by chaos. Heather burst into the room, her face pale. There are police cars pulling up. 3 of them, she gasped. Adrenaline hit me like a wave. I unmuted the phone. Mr. Davies, you're not going to believe this, I said, my voice tight. My house is being surrounded by police drones and patrol cars. I have no idea why. Stay on the line, Davies snapped, his tone suddenly sharp, commanding. Do not hang up. And then my phone buzzed. A text from Uncle Jimmy with a link. I clicked it, and my stomach dropped. Karen's live stream, the drone footage, the caption about her son Trevor being a victim of the HOA Youthful Desires provision. Her boy flailing on my lawn like a bad movie extra. The bent butter knife, the fresh scratch on my Harley. It was all there. A performance so audacious, so blatantly false, it would have been laughable if it weren't aimed at destroying me. Mr. Davies, I said, my voice low with fury. You need to see this. She's live streaming it from her Facebook. You need to see it for yourself. I emailed him the link. The silence that followed was crushing. Seconds ticked like hours. I watched Trevor on the feed, pointing. A trembling hand toward my house, his face painted with counterfeit terror. Any moment I expected officers to break down my door. Then Davies spoke. The patient, neutral tone was gone. His voice was cold, precise, dangerous. I see it. She has no idea you're on the phone with me, does she? A slow, grim smile spread across my face. Not a clue. This wasn't a disaster. This wasn't the end. This was the twist I never saw coming. My fraud case had been compelling, yes, but still abstract. Now, in real time, Karen had shown herself to be not just a thief, but unstable, vindictive, and reckless enough to commit a felony on camera. She thought she was pulling strings. In reality, she had just put on the performance of a lifetime before the exact person she least wanted as an audience. The question wasn't if the state would take my case anymore. It was how many new charges would be added. On the live stream, one of the officers crouched beside Trevor, at first concerned, then visibly puzzled. The victim seemed far more interested in sipping his energy drink than holding up his act. Meanwhile, Davies had shifted into full command mode. This is Arthur Davies with the state attorney's office, he barked into the line. Patch me through to the senior officer on the scene, now. The dispatcher hesitated, then scrambled. Davies turned back to me, his voice clipped but steady. Do you have security cameras? Yes, I replied, relief flooding me. A 4K system with audio. It's been recording everything. I could practically hear the smile in his voice. Perfect. Don't go outside. Don't engage. Let them do their job. They're about to learn something very important. That was the first twist, the tables flipping so fast it gave me whiplash. Karen thought she could control the narrative with her fake provision and frantic theatrics. She assumed the police would take her word over mine. What she didn't count on was the second audience. She was playing checkers. We were playing chess. Still, the rage burned in me. A part of me wanted to destroy her publicly, leak the footage, let the internet tear her apart, watch her kingdom of fear collapse under ridicule. But then Heather came to my side, sliding her hand into mine. Her eyes, once fearful, now shone with steel. That woman is evil, she whispered. Then softer. But don't sink to her level. Please. I just want our life back. Her words cut through the haze. She was right. Revenge was easy. Justice was harder, but lasting. So I made a choice. I wouldn't fight her on her battlefield of chaos and spectacle. I'd fight her with mine, evidence, law, and patience. On the live feed, the senior officer had arrived, a weary man with a hardened face. Karen was gesturing wildly on her lawn, pointing at my house, her voice surely rising in shrill indignation, but the sergeant wasn't moving. He was listening, calm, unreadable. And I knew what he was hearing in his earpiece: Davies, the state attorney's office, and the truth. She had been blaming me for tormenting her son, but at that very moment, on a recorded call with the state attorney's office, the truth was spilling out. They were outlining a massive fraud case against her, and video evidence had already surfaced. Her son trying to steal the very motorcycle she claimed he wanted to admire. The world beneath Karen's feet was collapsing, though she had no idea why. She thought she was sparring with a small-town cop, when in reality she was standing against the full weight of the state. "All right," Davies said calmly, his voice steady again. "The sergeant is updated. He'll secure the scene and take statements. He has my number. Now, about your camera footage, I need the original file. Do not share it. Do not post it. It's evidence now." This was the moment of choice. I could be a vigilante, or I could be a witness. I looked at Heather's steady face, the life we had built together. Vengeance burned hot for an instant, but justice had weight, permanence. "You'll have it in 5 minutes," I replied. The decision was made. The law would be my weapon. Her own actions would be her downfall. A strange calm settled over me. The police dispersed. Drones lifted into the sky. The spectacle was over. Karen stood rooted in her yard, her expression a storm of rage and confusion. She didn't know her every word, every lie, was feeding a much bigger file. She thought she had stumbled in a minor fight, unaware she had just lost the war. The immediate danger was gone, but the battle had only begun. This was the time to move from defense to offense, not with rage, but with the cold weight of the system she had foolishly challenged. The moral high ground had its appeal, but the strategic high ground was my battlefield. My decision wasn't about virtue. It was about being smarter. Her world was built on gossip and intimidation. Mine was built on data and undeniable proof. To defeat her, I had to pull her into my world, where her tactics meant nothing. The next few days were deceptively calm. The police filed their report, and thanks to intervention from the state attorney, it left no doubt. 2 days later, I saw her sipping coffee at the clubhouse, laughing into her phone, until a plainclothes detective slid a report across her table. Unfounded 911 call, originating from homeowner Karen Lance. Preliminary evidence, juvenile son attempting theft. Her face drained as steam clouded her glasses. That document was a bomb, and Davies had the trigger. "Lay low," he advised me. "Let her think she escaped. Arrogance will make her sloppy." He was right. 2 days later, another violation. Notice appeared on my door, $500 for the police raid she herself had caused. It was audacious, even for her. Classic Karen. Double down, never admit fault, always claim victimhood. I scanned it, emailed it to Davies with a one-line message. Exhibit B. His reply came instantly. "Keep them coming. It wasn't a loud fight. It was a chess match. Quiet, deadly." Every step she took, thinking she had me cornered, only pushed her further into my trap. Piece by piece, I was collecting proof of her own stupidity. Meanwhile, the neighborhood buzzed. Her live stream had been seen before she deleted it. Rumors spread. Some sided with her, others doubted. The community was a powder keg, and I was ready to light the match. Davies and I had a plan. The financial fraud case would take time, but the false 911 call was immediate. The key was my security footage. Instead of dumping it online, we submitted it to police. Now, it was public record. Uncle Jimmy, eager for action, filed the request and got the video legally released. With showman flair, he leaked it to a young, ambitious reporter. That night, the local news led with the story. The footage was clear. Trevor sneaking toward my Harley, fumbling with a butter knife, scratching the ignition, and collapsing in fake agony. Juxtaposed were Karen's wild accusations from her live stream, her invented youthful desires excuse, and even the fine she'd sent me. Pekin. Effect was explosive. The community erupted. Phones rang non-stop. The Facebook page turned into a courtroom. Years of silence broke as neighbors shared stories of her bullying, absurd fines, petty demands, threats. Her bored allies vanished. Her power base crumbled. Desperate, she called an emergency HOA meeting, claiming it was to fight misinformation. But we knew better. She thought it would be her stage of dominance. She didn't realize it would be her public downfall. Our command center was set. Uncle Jimmy on phones, Heather keeping us steady, Davies on a secure call. We prepared for her to lash out, but her next move was worse than we imagined. An hour. Before the meeting, a manila envelope slid under my door. Inside, financial documents, fake bank records, supposedly in my name. The forgeries were sloppy. Wrong account formats, pixelated logos, even a coffee stain. Amateur work. I nearly tossed them aside until I noticed one detail, a wire transfer to a company, Silver Creek Development Group. At the bottom, a note in a mismatched font. Per KL authorization, payment for Lot 17 clearing. Lot 17, the preserved. Land she had fought to rezone. The one residents had twice rejected. The forgery wasn't just a smear attempt, it was a mistake. A breadcrumb. Proof she had been dealing secretly with a development group, planning to sell protected land for personal profit. My suspicions of kickbacks were wrong. This wasn't about slices of pie. She wanted the entire bakery. I called Davies immediately. "Arthur, she just gave us everything," he inhaled sharply. "This isn't just embezzlement. This is corruption. This is RICO." The game had changed. The forgeries meant to ruin me had instead become the missing piece, the link tying her. Show of fraud to a massive conspiracy, and the meeting was only 30 minutes away. We had enough to crush her. The false 911 call, the shameless abuse of power, and now a no-confidence vote ready to topple her empire. The fraud and land grab case would play out in the courts, but tonight was about survival. "I'm using this," I told Davies, my voice steady as steel. "No," he shot back instantly. "That's evidence too risky. Let us handle it." "With respect, Arthur," I said, my patience thinning. "This is my neighborhood she's been bleeding dry. These are my neighbors. They need to see the truth tonight. Not next month. Not next year." There was a long pause. I saw the conflict in his eyes. The prosecutor wanting to protect the case. The man inside him knowing justice sometimes had to be loud. Finally, he gave a single nod. "Fine, but on my signal." The trap was set. The room was full, and Karen was walking straight into it. The clubhouse looked less like a meeting and more like a powder keg. Neighbors who'd once kept quiet now whispered furiously in tight groups, phones glowing with the news report still spreading like wildfire. Uncle Jimmy worked the crowd like a campaign manager, whispering encouragement. Stick to the plan. Let her hang herself. Heather sat beside me, her hand gripping mine. The fear was gone. She wasn't just my wife tonight. She was my ally, my partner. We sat in the front row deliberately. I wanted Karen to see my face. I wanted her to know I wasn't hiding. 5 minutes late, Karen stormed in. 2 board members trailed behind her like unwilling hostages. She slapped the gavel down, the sound unnaturally sharp. "This meeting will come to order," she barked. For 10 minutes she ranted, spinning herself as the victim, dismissing the news as lies, painting me as the mastermind of some vendetta. It was her usual cocktail of arrogance and gaslighting. Then came her big reveal. "These," she sneered, holding up the fake bank statements, "prove that the man leading this witch hunt is hiding serious crimes of his own." A gasp swept the room. A few heads turned toward me, eyes narrowing with suspicion. She thought she'd flipped the script. She thought she had me cornered. I stood slowly, my voice calm. "Karen, those papers are forgeries. And not even good. Ones, that account number, too many digits. And I'm pretty sure the UBS logo wasn't made in Microsoft Paint." Laughter rippled through the room. Her smirk faltered. "But I'm glad you brought them." I pressed on, my voice hardening. Because you made a mistake. You left a trail, a payment to Silver Creek Development Group, for clearing Lot 17. Her face drained of color. She stammered, but the room was already buzzing. Everyone knew what Lot 17 was, the protected land she swore was worthless. You were selling off our preserve, weren't you, Karen? The back doors burst open. Two men in dark suits stepped in, followed by Davies flashing his badge. Karen Lance, his voice thundered. You are under investigation for filing a false police report and for abuse of your office. I suggest you stop talking. Chaos exploded. Neighbors shouted, phones recorded. Her board members looked ready to collapse. And then Uncle Jimmy, bless his showmanship, climbed onto a chair. I move for a vote of no confidence in President Karen Lance. He boomed. All in favor. Say aye. The response was deafening. Aye! It was unanimous. Years of fear and silence drowned out in one tidal wave of voices. A camera caught Karen's face. Utter devastation, her power crumbling in front. Of everyone. Her reign was over. The fraud case and the land grab would come later in court, where the indictments would bury her and her partners for good. But tonight was the moment her stranglehold on the community was broken. In the days that followed, the air in Eagle's Landing felt lighter. Fines were thrown out. An interim board was sworn in. The preserve was secured forever. Neighbors smiled at each other again. One evening, Heather and I sat on the porch watching the sun slip over the lake. For the first time in years, it was peaceful. The next morning, I pulled out the birdhouse she painted long ago, hung it on the oak in the front yard. It wasn't just decoration, it was a reminder that even against a bully, truth and persistence could win. Later, I rolled my Harley from the garage. The ignition still bore the scar from Trevor's knife, and I chose to leave it. A reminder that some fights are worth having. When the engine roared to life and echoed down Cedar Lane, it wasn't just noise. It was victory. It was freedom. Because the real lesson was simple. Some things, your home, your family, your peace, are always worth fighting for.